The morning of my father's funeral, I woke up at 5 a.m. in a hotel room that smelled like cheap air freshener and old carpet. I hadn't slept in my childhood home in Portland in 15 years. Couldn't. Too many ghosts. Too many memories of things I'd rather forget. I'm Michael Carson, 52 years old, high school history teacher in a small town outside Seattle. Divorced. No kids. Simple life. Quiet life. The kind of life where you grade papers on Friday nights and consider it a wild weekend if you finish an entire Netflix series. My father, Richard Carson, had been a different kind of man. Real estate developer. Built half the commercial properties in downtown Portland during the 80s and 90s. Big personality, big ambitions. Big disappointments in his two sons who didn't follow in his footsteps. Me, the younger one, who chose teaching over business. And my brother James, the older one, who chose, James chose whatever was easiest at any given moment. The call had come 6 days ago, Tuesday afternoon. I was explaining the causes of World War I to a classroom of bored sophomores when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. During the break between periods, I checked. 17 missed calls. All from the same Portland number. My stomach dropped before I even listened to the voicemail. Mr. Carson, this is Providence Hospital. Your father, Richard Carson, was brought in this morning after a massive heart attack. You should come immediately. The doctors don't expect you should come now. I'd driven 4 hours in a daze. Arrived at the hospital at 7 p.m. My father was already gone. Had been gone for 3 hours by the time I walked into that sterile room where his body lay covered in a white sheet. James hadn't been there. Hadn't answered his phone. Hadn't shown up until the next day, smelling like whiskey and making excuses about being out of town on business. James hadn't had legitimate business in a decade, but that was a conversation for another time. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday. Traditional service at St. Mary's Cathedral, the church where our mother's funeral had been held 8 years ago. Then burial at Riverside Cemetery, where 3 generations of Carsons had been laid to rest. I put on my dark suit, the same one I wore to parent-teacher conferences and the occasional wedding, and drove to the cathedral in my 15-year-old Honda. The parking lot was already filling up. My father had known a lot of people, business partners, city council members, old colleagues from the construction days, all of them showing up to pay respects to a man who'd built half their offices. James was standing near the entrance when I arrived. Designer suit, probably cost more than my monthly salary. Hair perfectly styled. Sunglasses, even though it was overcast. He looked like he was attending a red carpet event. Not our father's funeral. Michael, he nodded, didn't hug me. We weren't the hugging type of family. James, you look tired. I drove 4 hours after teaching all day. How do I look like I should look? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Fair enough. Listen, we need to talk after this. About Dad's estate. About the will. Can we maybe bury him first? Of course. I'm just saying we should talk. Soon. Something in his tone made my neck tense, but I nodded and walked past him into cathedral. The service was what you'd expect. Ministers saying generic things about a man he'd met twice. Business partners giving carefully worded eulogies that praised my father's vision and determination without mentioning how cutthroat he'd been. My cousin, Sarah, who'd always been closer to Dad than either of his sons, spoke about Sunday dinners and his terrible jokes and how he'd taught her to change a tire when she was 16. I didn't speak. Neither did James. We sat in the front row. 2 brothers who'd barely exchanged 100 words in the past 5 years, pretending to grieve together. The burial was worse. Cold November wind cutting through the cemetery. Rain threatening, but never quite starting. The priest saying words I didn't hear. Watching the casket lower into ground next to our mother's grave. The headstone had already been prepared. Richard James Carson, 1951 to 2024, beloved father and builder. Beloved father. The words fell hollow. He'd loved us, I suppose, in his own distant way. But beloved suggested warmth we'd never quite received. After the burial, people lingered, shaking hands, sharing condolences, telling stories I'd heard a dozen times. I stood by the grave, waiting for everyone to leave, wanting a moment alone. Just me and the hole in the ground where they'd put what was left of my father. James appeared beside me. Still a crowd pleaser, even in death. That's one way to put it. Listen, about that conversation. James, can it wait? Can we do this tomorrow? It really can't. His voice had changed. Harder now. More focused. There are some time-sensitive issues with the estate. We need to talk. Now! I looked at him. Really looked at him. His jaw was tight. His eyes behind those stupid sunglasses were calculating. This wasn't grief. This was business. Fine. Where? Not here. Too many people. Let's go to the parking lot. We can talk in private. I should have said no. Should have insisted on tomorrow or later or never. But I was tired, emotionally wrung out. And some part of me just wanted to get whatever this was over with. We walked through the cemetery in silence. Past rows of headstones marking people I'd never known. Past the old oak tree where James had fallen and broken his arm when we were kids. Past a maintenance shed where we'd hidden during our mother's burial because James couldn't handle seeing her casket. The parking lot was mostly empty now. Just a few scattered cars belonging to the gravediggers and cemetery staff. My Honda sat alone in the far corner, rusted and out of place among the newer vehicles. James stopped between his BMW and my car, looked around, checking that we were alone. Okay, I said, crossing my arms. What's so urgent? Dad's was read yesterday. Well, sort of. The lawyer gave me a preliminary summary. Official reading is Monday, but I got the main points. And it's complicated. He left the real estate business to both of us. 50-50 split. The properties, the company assets, the investment portfolio. Everything divided equally. I blinked. He left me half? He always said I'd disappointed him by becoming a teacher instead of... Yeah, well, apparently he had a change of heart. Or felt guilty. Who knows? Point is, you're getting half. Which comes out to about $1.3 million after taxes and estate fees. Maybe more depending on how some properties appraise. $1.3 million. The number didn't feel real. I made $54,000 a year as a teacher. I drove a car with 200,000 miles on it. I rented a one-bedroom apartment. And now I was supposed to inherit over $1 million? Michael, James's voice had changed again. Lower now. Almost threatening. Here's the thing. I need your half. What? I need you to sign over your half of the inheritance to me. All of it. I'll give you $100,000. That's generous. That's way more than you make teaching for 2 years. You take the $100K. I take the rest. Everyone's happy. I stared at him. Are you insane? Dad left me half. Why would I give it to you? Because I have debts, Michael. Serious debts. People I owe money to who aren't polite about collection. That sounds like your problem. It's about to become yours. James stepped closer. His voice dropped to just above a whisper. Give me $675,000 from your half of the inheritance, or I'll tell everyone about that thing you did in 2009. The family will disown you. Hell, you'll probably lose your teaching license. The world tilted. 2009. The year I didn't talk about. The year I'd buried so deep, I sometimes almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but my voice came out wrong. Weak. Don't. James pulled off his sunglasses. His eyes were hard. Don't insult me by pretending. I know what you did. I have proof. And if you don't give me the money, I'll make sure everyone else knows too. My hands were shaking. I shoved them in my pockets. How long have you known? Does it matter? What matters is what happens next. You give me $675. We split the rest, however. I don't care. But that amount, specifically, I need. And I need it fast. Wire transfer as soon as the estate clears. No delays, no excuses. And if I don't... James smiled. It was the cruelest expression I'd ever seen on my brother's face. Then I'll tell them. I'll tell Aunt Catherine, Uncle Robert, Sarah, Everyone at the reading on Monday. I'll tell your principal. I'll tell the school board. I'll tell anyone who'll listen that Michael Carson, upstanding history teacher, responsible citizen, committed fraud and theft in 2009. You'll be destroyed. The rain that had been threatening all day finally started. Light drops at first, then heavier. Neither of us moved. You do that? I asked. To your own brother? You're not my brother right now. You're an obstacle between me and money I desperately need. So, yeah, Michael, I'd do that. I looked at him standing there in his expensive suit with his expensive car, making threats in the parking lot of our father's burial. And I thought about all the years we've been brothers, fighting over toys as kids, competing for Dad's approval as teenagers, drifting apart as adults. When had he become this? Or maybe the better question, had he always been this, and I had just been too naive to see it? I need to think about it, I said finally. No thinking. I need an answer now. Yes or no. Give me the money or I blow up your life. Simple choice. The rain was coming down harder. My shirt was getting soaked through. I could feel water running down my neck, cold and unpleasant. I need to get something for my car, I said. What? Just hold on. I walked to my Honda, fumbling with my keys, hands still shaking. Behind me, I could hear James sighing, impatient, probably checking his watch. I opened the driver's door, leaned in like I was looking for something in the back seat, but instead, I popped open the glove compartment. Inside was the usual clutter: registration, insurance papers, a flashlight that probably didn't work, old napkins from fast food restaurants, and underneath all of it, a manila envelope, thick, sealed, with a date written on the front in my handwriting. September 2009. I'd kept it for 15 years. Told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd never need it, that I should probably just burn it and forget the whole thing ever happened. But I'd kept it anyway, just in case. I pulled out the envelope, closed the glove compartment, and turned back to James. He was standing in the rain, arms crossed, looking annoyed. What's that? He asked. This, I said, holding up the envelope, is why you should have left us alone. If this story is hitting you hard, if you've ever had that moment where family turned into something you didn't recognize, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to Wilken Vengeance. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you got your own story about blackmail, betrayal, or brothers who became strangers, share below. Sometimes we need to know we're not the only ones. Your story matters. I walked back toward James. He watched me approach, confusion mixed with suspicion crossing his face. What is that? He asked again. This is a recording. Audio, video, and documented evidence of everything that happened in September 2009. The thing you're threatening to expose? I have proof that it was you. Not me. You. The color started draining from James's face. That's not possible. It's very possible. See, in 2009, when things went sideways with Dad's Portland project, the one where $250,000 went missing from the escrow account, you asked me to cover for you. Begged me, actually. Said you gotten in over your head with some investors, that you borrowed money against the project funds, that if Dad found out he'd cut you off completely. Stop, James said, voice low. You asked me to tell Dad and the auditors that I'd seen you working late at the office, that I'd been there with you, that there was no way you could have accessed those accounts. You needed an alibi, and I gave it to you because you were my brother. I said stop. But I'm not stupid, James. I knew what you were doing, so I kept records. Emails where you admitted what you'd done. Text messages where you thanked me for covering. Security footage I pulled from the office, showing you accessing the escrow accounts after hours. Bank statements showing deposits to your personal accounts that matched the missing amounts. I held up the envelope. Rain was soaking through the paper, but it was still intact. 15 years of insurance against exactly this moment. I kept it all. Every piece of evidence showing that you committed the fraud, not me, that I was just the idiot brother who helped you hide it, because I thought family meant something. James's face had gone from white to gray. His hands dropped to his sides. Michael, wait. Let's talk about this. We are talking. You threatened to destroy my life over something you did. So here's what's going to happen instead. The rain was really coming down now. Cold November rain. That felt like needles against my skin. But I didn't care. 15 years of guilt, of wondering if I'd done the right thing by covering for him, of carrying the weight of his crimes. All of it was washing away in that parking lot. You're going to leave, I said. You're going to take whatever Dad left you in the will and disappear from my life. You're not going to ask me for money. You're not going to threaten me. You're not going to contact me at all unless it's absolutely necessary and through a lawyer. And if I don't, then I take this envelope to the police. I tell them everything about the escrow fraud, about how you framed the project for failure, about how you've been lying to Dad and everyone else for 15 years. You'll go to prison, James. Fraud, embezzlement, whatever else they can make stick. Is that worth $675,000 to you? James stared at me. Water was running down his face. Rain mixed with what might have been tears. He looked smaller somehow, less dangerous. Just a desperate man who'd made a bad bet. I have debts, he said quietly. Real debts. Bad people. I wasn't lying about that. Then I guess you should have lived within your means. Or better yet, not tried to steal from your own brother at your father's funeral. Michael, please. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You spent 15 years thinking I was weak. Thinking I was a failure who became a teacher instead of following in Dad's footsteps. Thinking you were smarter, better, more successful. But you know what, James? I sleep at night. I pay my bills. I don't owe anyone anything. Can you say the same? He couldn't. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Go home, I said. Deal with your debts however you need to, but leave me out of it. If I don't pay these people, that's your problem. You made your choices. You live with them. I turned and started walking back to my car. Behind me, I heard James call out, "You're really going to do this? Abandon your own brother?" I stopped, turned back. You abandoned me the second you decided to blackmail me in a cemetery parking lot. We're done, James. We've been done for years. I was just too stupid to see it. I got in my Honda, started the engine, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see James standing alone in the rain, next to his BMW, looking lost. I didn't feel bad for him. I didn't feel anything except relief. The hotel room was cold when I got back. I changed out of my wet clothes, made instant coffee from the machine on the desk, and sat on the bed with a manila envelope. I opened it for the first time in years. Everything was still there, preserved in plastic sleeves. Printed emails from James's old account, dated September 2009, discussing the borrowed money text message screenshots where he thanked me for covering for him with the old man, a USB drive containing security footage from Dad's office bank statements showing suspicious deposits, a signed letter from James, dated September 15th, 2009, promising to make this right and admitting everything. I gathered it all over the course of 2 weeks that September. While James had been panicking about Dad finding out, I'd been methodically documenting everything, not because I planned to use it, but because some instinct told me I needed insurance. Dad never had found out. The missing money was eventually written off as a loss from the failed project. The investors moved on. James had gotten away with it. Until today. My phone rang. James. I didn't answer. He called 3 more times. Left a voicemail. Michael, please. We need to talk about this. I can explain. Just, please call me back. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. The reading was Monday morning at Dad's lawyer's office. I showed up 15 minutes early, wearing the same dark suit, now dry cleaned. The lawyer, Richard Thompson, was a man in his 70s who'd been handling Dad's affairs for 30 years. Michael, good to see you. How are you holding up? I'm managing. Is James here yet? Not yet. He called this morning. Actually, said he couldn't make it. Asked if we could do it without him. I felt something loosen in my chest. He's not coming? Sent a signed proxy, giving you authority to handle his portion. Said he trusts you to deal with everything fairly. Thompson looked confused. Unusual, but not unheard of. Brothers often work these things out between themselves. I nodded, said nothing. The will reading was straightforward. Dad had split everything 50-50, exactly as James had said. The real estate company, the investment accounts, the properties. After taxes and fees, my half came to just under $1.4 million. James's half, which he'd given me proxy authority over, came to the same. You can transfer his portion to his accounts whenever you're ready, Thompson said. Or if you want to discuss consolidation or sale of joint assets, we can arrange that. But legally, you have control over the immediate disposition. What if James wants to sell his share of the company to me? Thompson raised his eyebrows. That's between you two. If he wants to sell, we can draw up paperwork. You need to agree on a price. I'll talk to him about it. I left the lawyer's office with copies of everything, sat in my car in the parking lot, and called James. He answered on the first ring. Michael, you didn't come to the reading. No. Why? Silence. Then, because you were right. About everything. I've been a terrible brother. I tried to blackmail you at Dad's funeral. I don't deserve to sit in the same room as you. I could hear traffic in the background on his end. Where are you? Leaving Portland. Heading to California. I'm going to deal with my debts, sell some things, figure out my life. I'm not going to bother you anymore. James. I mean it. You were right. I made my choices. Time to live with them. Just do me one favor. What? Don't tell anyone. About 2009. About what I did. Dad's gone. No point in tarnishing his legacy or the company reputation. Just keep it between us. Please. I thought about that. About the secret I'd carried for 15 years. About whether justice required public exposure or if private accountability was enough. I won't tell anyone, I said finally. But you need help, James. Professional help. For whatever's going on with you. Yeah, I know. I'm looking into it. And the debts? The people you owe? I'll figure it out. Sell my half of the business to you if you want it. Whatever keeps things clean. How much do you owe? He laughed bitter. $675,000. That's why I asked for that specific amount. It's not greed, Michael. It's desperation. Who do you owe? People you don't want to know about. Investments that went bad. Gambling debts. Loans from individuals who don't accept late payments. I've been dodging them for 2 years. I thought Dad's money would save me. I closed my eyes. My brother, the successful businessman, the golden child, the one who'd followed in Dad's footsteps, was broken running from loan sharks. I'll buy your half of the business, I said. Give you enough to clear your debts and start over. Michael, you don't have to. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because Dad would have wanted the business to stay in the family. And because despite everything, you're still my brother. But this is the last time, James. You take this money, you clear your debts, and you figure out your life. I'm not bailing you out again. I understand. Thank you. Really, thank you. One condition. Anything. You get help. Real help. Therapy, financial counseling, whatever it takes. I'll pay for it. But you have to actually do it. Silence. Then quietly. Okay, I will. I promise. We worked out the details over the next week. James sold me his half of Dad's business for $900,000. Enough to clear his debts and have some left over to relocate and start fresh. Thompson drew up the papers. We signed them separately, in different cities, through proxies. I never saw James again in person. He moved to San Diego, got a job doing property management for a small firm. Not glamorous, but honest work. He called me every few months. Awkward conversations at first, then gradually easier. He was seeing a therapist, attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, living in a studio apartment, and driving a 10-year-old Toyota. It's strange, he said during one call, maybe 6 months after the funeral. I'm making $40,000 a year, living in 600 square feet, and I'm happier than I've been in a decade. Turns out debt and shame weigh more than success, I said. Yeah, turns out. As for me, I kept teaching. Surprising, maybe, given that I was suddenly a millionaire. But I liked my job, liked my students, liked the routine of lesson plans and grading papers, and watching kids figure out that history was more than just dates and dead people. I did upgrade my car, though, bought a new Honda. Nothing fancy, just something that didn't threaten to break down every time I drove to Portland. I invested most of the inheritance, set up college funds for my cousin Sarah's kids, donated to the school district's underfunded arts program, bought a small house with a yard instead of renting, and I kept Dad's real estate business running. Hired a management company to handle day-to-day operations. The properties were solid. Dad had known what he was doing, even if he'd been difficult in every other way. They generated steady income that mostly went to charity. A year after the funeral, I drove back to Riverside Cemetery. It was autumn again. The oak tree where James had broken his arm was dropping leaves. The maintenance shed looked exactly the same. I stood at Dad's grave. Someone had left flowers recently, probably Sarah. The headstone had weathered a bit, moss growing at the base. In a few more years, it would look like it had been there forever. Just another marker in a field of markers. I kept the business going, I said aloud, feeling foolish but not caring. James is doing better. We're not close, but we're talking. I don't know if that's what you wanted, but it's what we've got. The wind blew leaves across the grass. No response, of course. Dead men don't answer prayers or confessions. I wish you'd been different, I continued. I wish you'd been the kind of father we could talk to. I wish you'd seen that success isn't everything. But I get it now, I think. You did the best you could with what you had. I stayed for another 10 minutes. Then I walked back to my car, past a spot in the parking lot where James had tried to blackmail me. Someone else's car was parked there now. Life moving on, as it always does. The manila envelope with the 2009 evidence was in my fireplace at home. I'd burned it 3 months after the funeral, watched the papers curl and blacken, and turn to ash. The USB drive I'd smashed with a hammer and thrown away. James didn't need that hanging over him anymore, and I didn't need to carry it. Some weights you put down not because you forgive, but because you're tired of holding them. Listen, if you made it this far, this story probably hit different for you. If you ever dealt with family betrayal, if you've ever had to choose between revenge and peace, if you've ever discovered that the people you grew up with became strangers, don't just scroll past. Subscribe to Wilken Vengeance. Turn on notifications. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And drop a comment. Tell me your truth. Have you ever been blackmailed by someone you loved? Have you ever had to become the strong one when your family fell apart? Your voice matters. Your story can help someone else who's standing in their own parking lot, deciding what to do next. 2 years after the funeral, I got a call from James. Not our usual scheduled catch-up. This was different. His voice was shaking. Michael, I need to tell you something. What's wrong? I got married. I sat up. You what? Her name is Patricia. She's a therapist, not my therapist. That would be unethical, but we met through the GA meetings. She's been in recovery for 8 years. We've been dating for 6 months. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to jinx it, but we got married last week. Just courthouse thing. Nothing fancy. James, that's great. Really. I called because I wanted you to meet her. Wanted her to meet you. You're my only family, Michael. I know I don't deserve your time after what I did, but if you could maybe come down to San Diego sometime. I'll come, I said. Next month? School has a break. Really? Really? I flew down in October. James met me at the airport. He looked different. Older but healthier. Less polished, more real. We hugged, awkward and uncertain, the way brothers do when they're trying to rebuild something broken. Patricia was warm and funny and called James out on his bullshit in a way that made me like her immediately. We had dinner at their small apartment. Nothing fancy. Pasta and salad and cheap wine. It was the best meal I'd had in years. He talks about you all the time, Patricia said, while James was in the kitchen getting dessert. About what you did for him. About the second chance you gave him. He's my brother. That's what you do. Not everyone does. Most people would have let him drown. You threw him a rope instead. I threw him a rope with conditions. He had to do the swimming himself. Still, that takes grace. James came back with store-bought cheesecake. We ate it and told stories. Not about Dad, or the funeral, or 2009. Just normal stories. Funny memories from childhood. James's terrible first apartment. My worst dating history. Patricia's stories about her own messy family. It wasn't perfect. The damage from that day in the cemetery parking lot. From 15 years of distance before that. From a lifetime of being raised by a man who measured love in terms of success. All of that was still there. But it was something. A start. A chance. When I flew home the next day, James hugged me at the airport. Really hugged me. Not the awkward shoulder pat we'd exchanged for decades. Thank you, he said, for not giving up on me. Thank you for not making me regret it. Now, 3 years after the funeral, I sometimes think about that day in the rain. About James's face when I pulled out the envelope. About the choice I made to offer grace instead of revenge. I teach my students that history is full of moments where people made choices, where they decided between vengeance and mercy, between holding grudges and letting go, between destroying their enemies and helping them become better. I tell them those choices matter, that they echo forward through time, that who we choose to be in our worst moments defines us more than who we are in our best ones. I don't tell them about James. Don't tell them about the blackmail, or the fraud, or the envelope I kept for 15 years. That's private. That's between brothers. But I think they understand the lesson anyway. I see it in their faces when we study the aftermath of wars, when we talk about reconciliation and rebuilding, when we discuss how enemies become allies, and how broken families sometimes piece themselves back together. Last month, James called to tell me Patricia was pregnant. They're having a girl. They want to name her after our mother. Is that okay with you? He asked. Using Mom's name? More than okay. It's perfect. Will you be the godfather? I know that's a big ask, and I know we're still working things out, but I can't think of anyone else I'd want. Yes, I said. I'd be honored. After we hung up, I sat in my small house, not quite as small as it used to be, but still modest, still quiet, and thought about the future, about being an uncle, about watching my niece grow up, about family that wasn't just about blood or obligation, but about choices we made every day to show up and try again. The manila envelope was long gone, the evidence destroyed, the secrets buried. What remained was simpler and more complicated than revenge. Two brothers tried to be better than they were, learning to carry each other's weight. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined standing in that cemetery parking lot in the rain. It was better, because revenge is easy. It's clean. It's satisfying in the moment. But grace? Grace is hard. Grace requires you to be stronger than your anger, wiser than your hurt, more committed to the future than imprisoned by the past. I'm not saying I'm a saint. I'm not saying what James did was forgivable in any easy way. Some betrayals leave scars that never fully heal. But I am saying that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the person you become by choosing mercy is worth more than the satisfaction of choosing vengeance. And that's worth something. That's worth everything. I still drive past Riverside Cemetery sometimes. Still stop at my parents' graves. Still think about that November day when my brother tried to blackmail me, and I pulled out an envelope that changed both our lives. I don't regret keeping that evidence. It saved me, but I don't regret burning it either. It freed both of us. The cemetery looks different now. More trees, more markers, more people laid to rest. Life moving on, as it always does, whether we're ready or not. But in the parking lot, in the exact spot where James and I stood in the rain, I can still see us. Two brothers. Two choices. Two paths forward. I chose grace. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. Not perfectly. Not easily. But enough. And in the end, that's all any of us can hope for. Enough